In today's video we are going to be making this procedural mud shader in Blender. It looks something like this and you have all the controls here. So let's just get started. We are going to be deleting the default cube and then adding in a icosphere, setting the subdivisions to something like 5 and then shading smooth. Then open up the shader editor and add in a new shader and call this mud. What I want to do then is go over to cycles and set the feature set to experimental. Add in a subdivision surface modifier and set this to simple and then adaptive subdivision, and we can set this to something like 1 or 0.5. If we go into rendered mode, we can also add in some lights, and I also want a camera angle. We are going to be layering a bunch of noise textures on top of each other for extra realism, so this is going to be a little bit complex, but I'm going to walk you through it. So first we're going to add in a Voronoi texture. And we want to use the distance for kind of these peaks and valleys in the mud. If we set this in a displacement node in the scale and then into the displacement, we can see what this does. Right now it's really pointy. We don't really want that. So I'm going to set this to smooth F1 and then changing the smoothness here. Something like 0.5 will work for now. And this is already looking a lot better than the first one. Then what I want to do is mix that in with a noise texture. So add in a noise texture, add in a math node and set this to multiply just so it's not equal everywhere. The height, it changes depending on this noise texture. And we also add in some detail as well. For all of these, I'm going to clamp the values because I don't want them above 1 or below 0. I'm going to set the scale to something like 10, the detail 15, and that should be it. Right now this is what it looks like, really nice and detailed with peaks and valleys. Alright, so that is for part 1 of the noise layers. We're also going to be layering a wave texture on top, just to get that wavy feeling in there. We're going to set the scale to something really small, like 1, and then the detail and everything can stay the same. So just a default wave texture. And we're just going to be mixing that in. So add in a mix node and put it in between here. And this is what it looks like. And this will be the height, as you can see here. Just so we have some peaks and valleys again in different places. This can be pretty subtle, so we can change the factor here. Probably going to set them diagonal so you don't really notice that much when you are looking straight ahead. It looks a little bit better. Alright, then I'm going to layer in another noise texture. And this time we are going to mix it. So just add in another mix node, mix it in. And for this one, I want to use a really big scale. So something like 25. Yeah, there's really tiny details. And because we are adding in really tiny details, I also want to keep this factor really small, just so it's not really noticeable. To add even more detail, we can up the roughness to something like 0.6 and the detail as well. And that should be fine. Alright, this is already looking pretty cool, but I want another noise texture. Yes, we are going to be doing a lot of noise textures. Setting this to a scale of about 2 and a detail of about 2 as well. And then we can reset the roughness back to 0.5. And then if we plug this into a map range node, if we preview this, we can just set this to min to -1. So we have the old Musgrave texture. And this will be really nice for adding in some extra things on top. So just keeping it really smooth and not really detailed, but that will still add in some peaks and valleys or small little hills you won't notice that much. Alright, I also want to add in some weird shapes. So a texture you might never use is a magic texture. If we add that in here, you will see the texture looks like this. It's really a pretty odd texture. If we set the depth to 8, and then the scale to 5 and distortion of 1 is fine. If we then just multiply that with the noise texture, you will see that it adds in some weird little details. If you use the factor, it looks a little bit better as well because the colors, they just have different values and we want the factor. Alright, so now I'm just going to be mixing that in with the other shaders. And we can probably use this factor to just the amount we want to use. But as you can see, it adds in a lot of detail, weird shapes you might not get with other textures. Then the final texture for the displacement is going to be a Voronoi texture. We are going to be setting this to a scale of something like 15. We're going to be setting this to smooth F1 again, and just a smoothness of 0.1. And if we preview this, you will see it right here. And I wanted to add in some small pebbles. So this is what that's going to be. So add in a map range node, and then just get the from min and set this to something like 0.8. And now you have these weird looking shapes. All right, so now we are going to add in a math node, and we are going to be multiplying this with the noise texture here, just so we have some variations in brightness and just getting rid of some. Then multiplying it by 0.5, just so it's less bright. And then we are going to be adding that on to the rest of the textures, which is going to be this one. And that is what it looks like. And now in the height, you will see this is what it looks like now. So if you go and look at every single noise texture, you will see that a lot is added with each texture. You might think this is a lot of textures to use, and it is, totally is, but they all serve a purpose. Just going to clean everything up a little bit now. Yeah, this is just the displacement. We're going to be reusing this for the color and the bump, but we're also going to add in some more details as well. So the first thing I want to do is just add in some bump as well. So I think this is now only a bump from the displacement. But if you go over to options and then settings, setting this to displacement and bump, you will see, yeah, the displacement actually going on. And here's where we actually see that we need to change these values a little bit as well. So the mid level can be a 0, and then the scale can be pretty low. And you can just change this to whatever you want. And you can add this to something like a group input in a group node. But yeah, this is just whatever you want it to be. So maybe for now, for preview, just 0.2 is fine. Backing up the camera a little bit. All right, so now for the bump, I want to add in a noise texture. And I want the scale to be something like 10, and then the detail to 15. And this can be a bump texture. Add in the bump node, put the factor into the height and the normal to the normal. And this is what it will look like. The strength can be pretty subtle. We already have a lot of displacement going on. So 0.25 probably, maybe 0.2. And that could be just a bump. You don't really need to add much more. All right, something pretty important for this is the color, of course, but also the roughness. So we are going to change the color first and then the roughness. So what I want to do is add in a hue saturation value node. And in here we can just pick a color. I found a really nice one, so I'm just going to copy that over. I can show you the hex code here, RGB, HSV, so you can use that as well. So you have an exact match. But yeah, this is the color. If you put this into the base color, it looks something like this, really nice and muddy. You might also be happy with this already and call it a day, but I'm going to add in some more layers as well. So with this hue saturation and value node, I'm going to add or subtract some values. So the value to 0.5 to make it darker, and then saturation to 0.8, and then shift the hue around a bit to 0.48. And I want to do this in only certain places. So I'm going to pick one of these noise textures and use this as a factor. Just so if you preview the color right here, you will see we have some darker spots and some lighter spots. And I'm going to do this a second time and use a different noise texture. Also going to change some values around, maybe shift it to the other side. And if you preview that now, you will see a lot more variation. Maybe once more, just set this saturation to 0 and you can stay the same. So it's a grayscale, but now we're only going to do that for like these rocks here. These can be gray. So just drag off this, probably this multiply. Yeah, this one. Just drag off this. Add a name math node. And because this is it's pretty gray. So if we're going to plug this into the factor here, you probably won't really notice a thing. So we're going to multiply this and then just put that in here when we've multiplied it like 4 times. And now if we preview, you will see it does change a bit. Alright, so that is looking really nice. So now we just need to change the roughness and some other things as well. So for the roughness, what I want to do is not really use this entire node graph, but just pick a noise texture that is pretty global and has some variation and nice details in it. So we can look around and see which one it has. It's probably going to be this one, or maybe this one. I think I'm going to go with this noise texture. And what I want to do with that is just add it in math node, multiply it. Alright, so this will be the roughness controller. And we're just going to put that into the roughness here. And it looks pretty shiny, but we can change that here as well. You can also add in a map range node. Sometimes it gives some more control. So yeah, if we set this to 1, this will be rough. If we set this to 0, it will be really glossy. So I think this will be a better controller because we can actually get a really rough ground. For now I'm going to set it to 0.5. That looks alright. One other important thing to do with this mud shader is change this IOR value. You might think it doesn't really affect anything, but it really does. If we set this to 0.35, you will see it does change a bit. If we set this to 1, you will see it much more, or 2, a 3. But yeah, just keep it at a like normal value, so 0.135. I think it's water or glass. Maybe 1.33, which is water, I think. And that makes sense because mud is probably watery, so IOR of 1.33 should be, yeah, it should be logical. And yeah, that is pretty much it. You can just select everything here, hit Ctrl G, and then just put in all of the values you want in the group input, and then you can change them from the node group here. And this is what you'll end up with. What I did with this is add in all of these values here, rename them, everything like that. If we go into the node group here, it's all of the nodes I did, but then with some math nodes for seeds, and multiply nodes for the scale, just so I could change the scale with one parameter. Basically what these math nodes do is I look at what scale I put in before I connect everything, and then just grab one of these textures and make it the default. So for example, with this one I picked the Voronoi texture. The scale was set at 5, so if this noise texture I set at 10, I would just add in a multiply node of 2, and then I could connect it to this scale here, and everything would match up. But yeah, that is it. I also added in the specular if you want to change that. I just left it at the default value, and yeah, that's pretty much it.